Ambassador Zektar walked into the great hall with his head held high. His green skin gleamed under the bright lights of the Galactic Council chamber. His long tail swished behind him as he moved to the center podium. Around him, hundreds of alien beings sat in floating chairs, watching him with various types of eyes. The council chamber was huge. Its walls stretched up so high that the ceiling disappeared into darkness. Holographic displays showed star maps and data streams from across the galaxy. Representatives from dozens of different worlds sat in their assigned sections. Some breathed oxygen, like Zektar. Others wore special suits filled with their home atmosphere. "Fellow council members," Zektar began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber's sound system. "I stand before you today with excellent news. The Hegemony has successfully completed another expansion operation." A few beings in the audience shifted in their seats. The Hegemony was known for taking over new worlds, but they usually picked fights they could easily win. Most council members didn't pay much attention to these reports anymore. Zektar activated a holographic display that showed a small yellow star with several planets orbiting around it. 3 weeks ago, our scouting ships discovered this primitive solar system in Sector 7739. Intelligence. Reports showed the third planet contained a species that had barely left their own world. The display zoomed in on a blue and green planet. It looked peaceful from space, with white clouds swirling over its surface. "The species calls themselves humans," Zektar continued with a dismissive wave of his hand. "They had managed to build a few small stations in orbit around their planet and had colonies on nearby worlds. Their technology was at least 500 years behind our own." A representative from the Krell Empire, a being that looked like a giant insect, clicked its mandibles together. What was their military strength? Zektar's mouth twisted into what his species considered a smile. Pathetic. They had perhaps 200 small ships defending their system. Most of them were cargo vessels they had hastily fitted with weapons. Their largest warship was smaller than one of our escort fighters. The display changed to show recordings from the battle. Hegemony ships, sleek and dark, moved through space like hunting predators. The human ships looked crude and blocky in comparison. The recording showed brief flashes of weapon fire and several human ships exploding. "The battle lasted less than 6 hours, Zektar said proudly. "Their orbital defenses collapsed almost immediately. We destroyed their space stations and most of their fleet. The few ships that tried to run didn't make it far." A representative from the Vorthan Collective, a tall being with silver skin, leaned forward in its chair. "What about the planet's surface?" "We conducted precision strikes on their military installations and major cities," Zektar replied. "Standard procedure for primitive species that resist integration. The population has been reduced to manageable levels. Those who survived will serve as workers for our expansion in that sector." The chamber was quiet, except for the soft humming of the air circulation systems. This kind of report was normal for the Hegemony. They had been expanding their territory for centuries, always choosing weak targets that couldn't fight back effectively. Zektar gestured to the star map again. "The system contains useful resources. The fourth planet has large deposits of rare metals. The asteroid belt will provide materials for shipbuilding. The humans had already started mining operations that we can expand." A few council members nodded approvingly. The Hegemony's expansion provided resources that benefited the entire galactic economy. Most council members didn't care about the fate of primitive species as long as trade routes stayed open and resources kept flowing. The humans showed typical primitive thinking, Zektar said with contempt. They sent desperate messages asking for help from anyone who might be listening. They begged for mercy, even as our ships destroyed their defenses. Some of their final transmissions claimed they had allies among the stars who would come to help them. Several council members made sounds that might have been laughter in their respective species. The idea of primitives having galactic allies was amusing. Of course, no one came to help them, Sektar continued. The humans were alone and defenseless. They had no allies, no advanced technology, and no hope of survival against our fleet. The Hegemony ambassador activated another part of his display, showing images of destroyed human cities and burning space stations. The operation was so successful that High Command has decided to use this system as a staging area for further expansion into that region of space. In the back rows of the chamber, an ancient being slowly raised his head. Magistrate Kethmer was one of the oldest members of the council. His species lived for thousands of years, and he had been serving on the council for longer than most civilizations had existed. His gray skin was covered with intricate patterns that marked his advanced age. Kethmer rarely spoke during council sessions. He usually just listened and voted when required. But now something in Sektar's report had caught his attention. Ambassador. Kethmer's voice was quiet but carried clearly through the chamber. What did you say was the name of this species? Sektar looked surprised that the ancient magistrate had spoken. The species calls themselves humans, honored magistrate. They inhabited the third planet of the system, which they called Earth. The word hit Kethmer like a physical blow. His long fingers gripped the arms of his chair so tightly that the metal began to bend. His large eyes widened in what could only be described as terror. Did you say Earth? Kethmer's voice had changed. The quiet calm was gone, replaced by something that made several nearby council members turn to look at him. Sektar nodded confidently. Yes, Earth, a primitive world with abundant water and a variety of climates. The humans had barely begun to explore their own solar system when we arrived. Kethmer slowly stood up from his chair. At his full height, he towered over most of the other council members. His movements were careful and deliberate, like someone trying not to wake a sleeping monster. You attacked Earth, Kethmer said, his words falling into the chamber like stones dropping into still water. You attacked the humans. The way he said it wasn't a question. It was a statement filled with such horror that the entire chamber fell silent. Even the soft humming of the air system seemed to quiet down. Sektar looked around the chamber, confused by the sudden change in atmosphere. Yes, Magistrate. As I said, it was a complete victory for the Hegemony. The human resistance was eliminated quickly and efficiently. Kethmer's ancient eyes met Sektar's confident gaze. When he spoke again, his voice carried a weight that came from having lived through events most beings couldn't imagine. You have no idea what you have done. The council chamber had never been so quiet. Magistrate Kethmer stood motionless for several long moments, his ancient eyes staring at something far beyond the walls of the chamber. Around him, hundreds of council members waited in confused silence. Sektar shifted uncomfortably at the podium. He had expected praise for his successful military operation, not this strange reaction from the elderly magistrate. Sir, I'm not sure I understand your concern. The operation was completed according to standard protocols. Kethmer didn't respond immediately. Instead, he walked slowly toward a section of the chamber that most council members had never seen used. Ancient control panels lined one wall, covered in symbols from languages that had been dead for thousands of years. These were the oldest archives in the galaxy, repositories of information from civilizations that had existed before most current species had even evolved. Computer, Kethmer said in a voice that carried the authority of millennia. Access Archive Level 7. Authorization code KETH, single quotes, more dash, alpha dash, 9 dash 9 dash 7. The ancient systems came to life with a deep humming sound. Lights that hadn't been activated in thousands of years began to glow. Several council members moved closer. curious about what could require such old records. Archive Level 7 has been sealed for 47,000 years, the computer's voice announced. Are you certain you wish to proceed? I am certain, Kethmer replied grimly. Search parameters. Species designation, human. Planet designation, Earth. Time period, 50,000 years ago to present. Zektar laughed nervously. Magistrate, surely you don't believe these primitives had any significant history. Our intelligence clearly showed they had only recently developed space travel. The computer's voice cut through Zektar's words. Warning. Located files contain restricted information. Classification level. Absolute danger. Council authorization required for access. A chill ran through the chamber. Absolute danger was the highest classification level in the Galactic Archives. It was reserved for information about extinct species that had posed existential threats to galactic civilization itself. Authorization granted, Kethmer said. Display findings for full council review. The chamber's main holographic display activated, replacing the star maps with something far more disturbing. Ancient symbols appeared first, followed by text in various dead languages. Then, the translations began appearing in modern galactic standard. Species alert. The first file read. Classification. Apex predator. Threat level. Extinction class. Status. Do not engage under any circumstances. Murmurs of confusion rippled through the council. Several members stood up for better views of the display. The files continued to scroll past, each one more alarming than the last. Species analysis. Humans. Homeworld, Earth. Sol system. First contact. Galactic year 2847. Military assessment. Unknown weapons technology. Tactical. Adaptation rate. Unprecedented. More detailed files began appearing. Battle reports from conflicts that had taken place 50,000 years ago. The records showed human ships that looked nothing like the crude vessels Zektar had described. These were sleek, deadly craft that moved through space with impossible grace. Engagement Report 1. A file began. Human fleet encountered near Proxima Centauri. Imperial Navy forces. 200 heavy cruisers. 500 escort vessels. Human forces. 12. Unknown configuration ships. Battle duration. 17 minutes. Result. Complete Imperial defeat. Human casualties. Unknown. Imperial casualties. 100%. The chamber erupted in shocked voices. A 12-ship human fleet had destroyed 700 Imperial vessels in less than 20 minutes. This must be some kind of mistake, Zektar said, his voice higher than before. The humans we fought had no such capabilities. More files appeared, showing recorded video from ancient battles. The humans in these recordings moved like nothing the current council had ever seen. Their ships didn't just fight. They seemed to dance through space, avoiding enemy fire while delivering devastating attacks with surgical precision. Tactical analysis. Another file read. Human warfare methodology. Unknown. Humans appear to adapt combat techniques in real time. Enemy weapons and strategies become ineffective after single exposure. Human forces learn and counter new threats. Within minutes of first contact, a video file opened showing a massive space battle. Galactic forces outnumbered the humans by hundreds to one, but the human ships moved through the enemy formations like wolves among sheep. Every time the galactic forces tried a new tactic, the humans immediately countered it and turned it against them. Psychological warfare assessment. The next file began. Humans do not appear to experience fear in combat situations. Captured human personnel show nitrogen monoxide response to interrogation or torture. Human prisoners have been observed studying their captors. Security procedures, even while being executed. The files kept coming. painting a picture of humanity that was nothing like the primitive species Zektar had described. These humans were something far worse than just another warrior species. They were evolutionary perfectionism turned into a weapon. Expansion report, an ancient military commander had written. Human territory now encompasses 2,847 star systems. Their expansion rate continues to accelerate. Recommend immediate evacuation of all. Galactic forces from sectors 12 through 47. Intelligence update. Humans have begun incorporating captured galactic technology into their own designs. However, they do not simply copy our technology. They improve IT. Captured human weapons show efficiency ratings 340%, higher than original galactic designs. Kethmer watched the file scroll past with the expression of someone watching their worst nightmare come true. Keep reading, he told the computer. Show them everything. Final report from Admiral Vexton. A file appeared that was marked with the highest possible security clearances. Human forces have reached the core worlds. They do not seek to destroy US. This is worse. They are studying use. Every battle, every encounter. They learn more about how we think, how we fight, how we live. They are treating galactic civilization as a laboratory. And we are the experiments. The chamber had fallen completely silent again. Even the background systems seemed to have stopped making noise. Last entry, the final file read. Date, 50,127. Years ago, the humans have disappeared. Nitrogen monoxide explanation. Nitrogen monoxide. Warning, their fleet simply vanished. Overnight, all human colonies abandoned, all human space. Empty. Galactic High Command recommends immediate classification of all human-related information. These records are to be sealed and forgotten. If the humans ever return, may the gods help yous all. The holographic display went dark. The chamber remained silent for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. Finally, a council member from the Regalian Federation stood up. Her voice shook as she spoke. Magistrate Kethmer, are you saying that this species, these humans, they were here before? That they just left? Kethmer nodded slowly. They didn't just leave. They chose to leave. After demonstrating that they could have conquered the entire galaxy, they simply departed. We never knew why. Zektar was staring at the display with his mouth open. But that's impossible. The humans we fought were primitives. They had crude weapons and basic spacecraft. Did they? Kethmer asked quietly. Or did they appear primitive because that's what they wanted you to think? The ancient magistrate turned to face the full council. These records were sealed because our ancestors hoped humanity was gone forever. They prayed that the humans had destroyed themselves or found some other galaxy to explore. They made a pact to forget, to pretend it never happened. But now, Kethmer continued, his voice growing quieter with each word. Now you've attacked them. You've reminded them that we exist. You've given them a reason to remember us. The chamber erupted as hundreds of voices began talking at once. Council members were shouting questions, demanding explanations, calling for emergency sessions. But Zektar just stood at the podium, staring at the dark display screen, finally beginning to understand what he had done. He hadn't conquered a primitive species. He had just woken up the galaxy's worst nightmare. 3 weeks passed after the Council's discovery of the ancient records. 3 weeks of waiting for something terrible to happen. But Earth remained silent. Ambassador Zektar tried to maintain his confidence during this time. He attended council sessions with his head held high, insisting that the ancient records were just stories. Fear-mongering from a more superstitious age, he called them. The humans we defeated were exactly what they appeared to be. Primitives with crude weapons. But privately, Zektar contacted Hegemony High Command multiple times each day. Status report on Sector 7739, he would demand. Any unusual activity from the Earth system? The answers were always the same. All quiet, Ambassador. No sign of activity from the target world. As the days passed without incident, Zektar began to feel vindicated. He started giving interviews to galactic news networks, describing the ancient records as historical fiction and the fevered imaginations of extinct civilizations. If these humans were really so dangerous, he would say with a dismissive laugh, where are they now? Where is their great revenge fleet? We destroyed their world 3 weeks ago, and they haven't even sent us an angry message. The other council members were not so easily convinced. Many had trouble sleeping after seeing those ancient files. They found themselves checking news feeds constantly, looking for any sign that humanity was stirring. Magistrate Kethmer spent most of his time in the archives, digging through even older records. He found references to humans in files that went back hundreds of thousands of years. Each discovery made him more worried, not less. On the 15th day after the revelation, the first strange report came in. It was a minor incident, barely worth mentioning in normal times. A Hegemony patrol fleet had missed its scheduled check-in from the outer rim of their territory. 3 ships conducting routine patrols near an uninhabited system. Probably equipment failure, the Hegemony military spokesman announced when questioned. These patrols run for months without seeing anything interesting. Crews get careless with communications protocols. But 2 days later, another patrol fleet went silent. Then another. All of them on the outer edges of Hegemony space. All of them in sectors nowhere near Earth. Minor technical difficulties, Hegemony High Command insisted. We're investigating the communication failures. The galactic news networks started paying attention when the 4th patrol fleet disappeared. This one had been carrying a news correspondent who was documenting life on the frontier. His last transmission had been routine, describing the empty space between star systems. Everything normal out here, the correspondent had reported. Just empty space and distant stars. Wait, I'm getting something on the sensors. Looks like... Actually, I'm not sure what that is. Captain, are you seeing this? There's something on the edge of our detection range, but it's not showing up on any of our databases. It's like nothing I've ever... Captain? Captain, why are you looking at me like that? The transmission had cut off their when questioned about the missing fleets. Hegemony officials became increasingly vague in their responses. Routine maintenance issues, they would say, or temporary communication blackouts due to solar activity. But the missing patrols were only the beginning. Trade ships started. REPORTING strange experiences while traveling through Hegemony space. Captains would describe feeling like they were being watched, even in supposedly empty systems. Ship sensors would detect brief contacts that vanished before they could be identified. Something followed us for 6 hours through the Kara system, one trader reported. Never got close enough for visual contact, but it was there. Every time we changed course, it changed course. When we jumped to hyperspace, it was gone. Other traders reported finding Hegemony military installations completely abandoned, with no explanation for where the crews had gone. The facilities were intact, power systems still running, but empty of all personnel. Looked like everyone just got up and walked away in the middle of their shifts, one cargo captain reported. Food was still warm in the mess hall. Computer terminals were still logged in, but not a soul anywhere. The Hegemony military started refusing to comment on these incidents. When pressed by council investigators, they would only say that personnel movements were classified information. By the 3rd week, even Zektar was beginning to look nervous. The pattern of missing patrols and abandoned installations was spreading inward from the edges of Hegemony territory. moving slowly but steadily toward more populated systems. Trade through Hegemony space began to decline as merchants chose longer routes that avoided those sectors entirely. When asked why, most traders would just shake their heads and say the space felt wrong. Now, I've been running cargo for 30 years, one experienced captain told a news reporter. I know when something's hunting in a system, even if I can't see it. The whole Hegemony territory feels like a hunting ground now. The most disturbing reports came from long-range sensors stationed throughout the galaxy. These massive installations monitored space traffic and watched for potential threats. Their operators started reporting strange readings from the direction of Earth. Nothing definite, the sensor technicians would say when questioned. Just odd energy signatures that don't match anything in our databases. The readings appear and disappear too quickly to get a clear analysis. One sensor operator, speaking privately to a council investigator, was more specific. Whatever's out there, it's not trying to hide completely. It's like they want us to know something's coming, but they don't want us to know what. The most troubling incident occurred on the 20th day. A Hegemony admiral sent an encrypted message to High Command. But the encryption was broken, and the message was intercepted by Council intelligence. Request immediate reinforcement of all core systems, the message read. We have lost contact with 40% of Outer Rim forces. Remaining units report being observed by unknown vessels. Ships appear to be studying our patrol patterns and defense layouts. Recommend immediate withdrawal from sectors 12 through 31. When questioned about this message, Hegemony High Command denied it existed, but the most chilling detail came from a junior communications officer who leaked information to the Galactic press. According to her report, Hegemony High Command had received several transmissions from their Outer Rim forces. But these transmissions weren't distress calls. They were normal status reports, filed on schedule, from ships and crews that had supposedly vanished weeks ago. The transmissions came from the exact locations where the ships were supposed to be, the officer reported. Everything sounded normal. Crew members giving routine updates, reporting all systems functioning normally. But when we sent ships to those coordinates, there was nothing there. Empty space. The officer also reported that voice analysis of the transmissions showed they were definitely from the missing crews. But according to the timestamps, some of the reports were filed hours after the ships had supposedly disappeared. It was like the crews didn't know they were gone, she said. On the 21st day, Zektar received a priority message from Hegemony High Command. The message was brief and contained no details. Return to home territory immediately. Do not use normal travel routes. Council activities suspended until further notice. When Zektar tried to contact High Command for clarification, he found that all military communication channels had been restricted. He was told that operational security requirements prevented any detailed explanations. That evening, Magistrate Kethmer approached Zektar in the council chambers. The ancient being looked even older than usual, as if the weight of terrible knowledge was physically aging him. Ambassador, Kethmer said quietly, I have been monitoring transmissions from your territory. There have been no communications from Hegemony space for 6 hours. No military traffic, no civilian messages, no automated signals, nothing. Zektar stared at him. That's impossible. The Hegemony controls hundreds of systems. There should be thousands of transmissions at any given moment. Yes, Kethmer agreed. There should be, but there aren't. The ancient magistrate activated a holographic display showing communication traffic across the galaxy. Streams of light represented data flowing between star systems. The display looked like a vast spider web of connections, linking civilizations across thousands of light years. But in one section of the display, there was nothing. A dark zone where no signals flowed at all. The silence is spreading, Kethmer said. Whatever the humans are doing, they're doing it systematically. World by world, system by system. Zektar looked at the dark zone on the display. It covered nearly a quarter of hegemony space. They're not attacking, he said, his voice barely a whisper. They're not even fighting. They're just erasing us. Kethmer nodded grimly. And we have no idea how. As if responding to his words, the dark zone on the display grew larger. The truth began to emerge when Admiral Vortex of the Hegemony's Third Fleet managed to send one final transmission before his command ship went dark. The message was fragmented, clearly sent under extreme stress. Council intelligence had to piece it together from multiple intercepted signals, but when they did, the content sent shockwaves through every galactic government. This is Admiral Vortex to any Hegemony command post. The transmission began. The Admiral's voice was shaking, something unthinkable for a veteran military commander. We are under attack, but not in any way we understand. The enemy is not destroying our ships. They are taking them. Static filled the transmission for several seconds before the Admiral's voice returned. They appeared without warning. No sensor contact until they were right on top of us. Ship designs I've never seen before, but somehow familiar. They disabled our entire fleet in minutes, but caused no casualties. Not one death. They just neutralized us. The transmission quality degraded further, but the Admiral's next words were clear enough. They're boarding our ships, but they're not here to capture us. They're here to learn. They're studying our equipment, our procedures, our tactical databases. They've connected their systems to our computers, and they're downloading everything. Military protocols, fleet positions, command codes, supply routes, everything. A new voice could be heard in the background of the transmission, speaking words in a language the Council's translators couldn't identify. But somehow, the voice sounded familiar to anyone who had heard the ancient battle recordings. One of them is here now, Admiral Vortex continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. It looks almost like us, but wrong somehow. Like it was designed to be the perfect version of what we are. It's asking me questions about our command structure. Not threatening me, not torturing me. Just asking, like it genuinely wants to understand how we think. More static then. God's help us, I think I'm answering. I don't want to, but something about the way it asks makes me want to tell it everything. It's like talking to the galaxy's best interrogator, except it doesn't feel like interrogation. It feels like conversation. The transmission began breaking up badly, but fragments continued to come through. They're not conquering us. They're studying us, learning how galactic civilization works, taking our ships but leaving crews alive to observe. It's not a war. It's research. The final clear words sent chills through everyone who heard them. They're treating us like we treated the primitives we conquered, but they're better at it than we ever were. After that transmission, the Hegemony's communication blackout became complete. But the Council's worst fears were confirmed when other sources began reporting sightings of Hegemony ships operating in non-Hegemony territory. These ships appeared at the edges of other civilization space, but they weren't flying normal patterns. Instead of aggressive military formations, they moved like scout ships conducting detailed surveys. They would approach trade routes, observe traffic for hours, then disappear without making contact. When challenged, the ships would identify themselves using proper hegemony codes and transmit normal status updates. But their crews, when questioned over communication channels, gave responses that seemed slightly off to anyone who knew them. "This is Captain Morellis of the HNS Devastator," came one such response when a Regilian patrol challenged a hegemony ship. "We are conducting routine reconnaissance of this sector under special orders from High Command." The Rigelian captain knew Morellis personally and immediately noticed something wrong. "Morellis, you never call it routine reconnaissance. You always say boring patrol duty. And what's this about special orders? Last month you were complaining about being stuck with normal border patrol." The response came back immediately in Morellis' exact voice. "Apologies for the confusion, Captain Therex. Yes, boring patrol duty as always. High Command just wants us to be more professional in our communications." But when Captain Therex checked with Hegemony Command, he was told that Captain Morellis had been reported missing 3 weeks ago. Along with his ship. Similar incidents began occurring throughout the galaxy. Hegemony ships would appear in different sectors, operated by crews who acted almost exactly like themselves, but with small differences that only close friends would notice. The pattern became clear when Council Intelligence analyzed all the reports together. The human-controlled hegemony ships were systematically visiting every major civilization, studying their military capabilities, trade patterns, and governmental structures. They weren't preparing for conquest. They were conducting a comprehensive analysis of galactic civilization. But the most disturbing discoveries came when the first captured human technology was recovered. A trading vessel had found a damaged alien ship drifting in neutral space. The ship was unlike anything in current galactic databases, but its design elements matched descriptions from the ancient human war records. Council scientists who examined the wreckage made discoveries that terrified them. Human ships' computer systems were more advanced than anything the galaxy had ever seen, but they weren't built with completely alien technology. Instead, they were constructed using improved versions of galactic technology. Human engineers had taken standard galactic designs and enhanced them beyond recognition. "They've been studying us for weeks," the lead scientist reported to the council. "But they haven't just been learning about our current capabilities. They've been learning how our technology works at a fundamental level, then improving it." The scientist activated a holographic display showing the human ship's weapon systems. "This energy cannon uses the same basic principles as our standard military weapons, but it's approximately 400% more efficient. They found ways to improve our own technology that our scientists never imagined. But the weapons weren't the most impressive part of the ship. Their sensor systems," the scientist continued, "can apparently detect ships through hyperspace. They can track vessels that are moving faster than light across multiple star systems simultaneously. And their stealth technology makes them invisible to every detection method we have." The implications were staggering. The humans could see everything happening across the galaxy, but galactic civilizations couldn't detect them even when they were being directly observed. "But here's what truly concerns me," the scientist said, his voice dropping to almost a whisper. "This ship appears to have been deliberately damaged and left where we would find it. The damage patterns are too convenient, the location too obvious. They wanted us to recover this technology. Why?" asked a council member. "I think they want us to understand what we're dealing with. They want us to know how completely outclassed we are." As if to prove this point, reports began coming in of human ships appearing openly throughout the galaxy. Not hiding, not sneaking, just appearing in heavily populated systems and conducting obvious surveys. They would arrive, scan everything in the system, then send polite messages to local authorities, introducing themselves as human research vessels conducting peaceful observation studies. When challenged, they would simply state that they had no hostile intentions and were gathering information for diplomatic purposes. Any attempt to intercept or attack these ships ended the same way. The human vessels would simply vanish, only to reappear moments later in a different part of the system. Continuing their observations, one human ship spent an entire day orbiting the Galactic Council's home world, scanning every building and installation. When the Council's defense fleet tried to surround it, the ship disappeared and reappeared directly above the Council chambers, then transmitted a simple message. "Thank you for your cooperation. Survey complete." The message was delivered in perfect galactic standard, but with something that sounded almost like amusement in the synthesized voice dot by the end of the 4th week. The scope of the human response had become clear. They weren't just retaliating against the hegemony. They were conducting a complete analysis of galactic civilization. Every major government, every military force, every trade route, every technology dot, they were learning everything there was to know about their new neighbors dot, and the most terrifying part was how effortlessly they were doing it. The humans weren't straining to gather this information. They weren't working hard to outmaneuver galactic defenses. They were simply taking what they wanted, when they wanted it, without any force that the galaxy could muster being able to stop them. It was becoming clear that the ancient records had been wrong about one thing: the humans hadn't become weaker. During their long absence, they had become stronger. The end came not with a great battle, but with a simple message. It arrived simultaneously at every communication center in the galaxy. Every government building, every military command post, every news network, every civilian communication device. The message appeared on screens across thousands of worlds and hundreds of different languages, all at the exact same moment. "This is Fleet. Admiral Sarah Chung of the Human Colonial Defense Force. We request an immediate meeting with the Galactic Council to discuss terms for our species' return to galactic civilization." The message was polite, professional, and absolutely terrifying in its implications. The humans had just demonstrated that they could access every communication system in the galaxy whenever they chose to. But even more shocking was what happened next. Admiral Vortex walked into the council chambers. Hegemony commander looked exactly as he had before his disappearance, but council security scanners detected subtle differences. His walk was more confident, his posture more alert. When he spoke, his voice carried the same tone as always, but there was something new behind his eyes. "Honored council members," Admiral Vortex said, "I have been asked to deliver a message from the human government." Magistrate Kethmer leaned forward in his chair. "Admiral, our records show you were reported missing 4 weeks ago. Where have you been?" "I have been a guest of the Human Colonial Defense Force," Vortex replied calmly, "along with approximately 40,000 other Hegemony personnel. We have been treated with courtesy and respect while the humans learned about our civilization." The Admiral activated a holographic display that showed a detailed map of the galaxy. But this wasn't just any map. This showed current fleet positions, trade routes, resource allocations, and military capabilities for every major civilization. Information that should have been impossible for any single source to possess. The humans have spent the past month conducting what they call a comprehensive threat assessment of galactic civilization. Vortex continued. They wanted to understand who we are, how we think, and what kind of neighbors we might be. Ambassador Zektar, who had been silent since the ancient records were revealed, finally found his voice. "Where are the human fleets? Where are their weapons? Why haven't they attacked?" Admiral Vortex smiled, but it wasn't his usual expression. This smile carried knowledge that seemed to extend far beyond his personal experience. "Ambassador, you're still thinking like the old galaxy. The humans don't need fleets in the way we understand them. They don't need to mass ships for an invasion because they've already won." The holographic display changed to show technical specifications of human technology. Ships that could cross the galaxy in days, weapons that could disable entire fleets without killing anyone, sensors that could track every vessel in space simultaneously. They could have destroyed every military force in the galaxy weeks ago, Vortex continued. Instead, they chose to study us. They wanted to understand whether galactic civilization was worth preserving or whether it needed to be reorganized. A council member from the Andromedan Alliance stood up shakily. And what did they decide? That we have potential, Vortex replied. But that significant changes are needed. The chamber doors opened and 3 figures walked in. They appeared to be humanoid, but there was something about them that made every being in the chamber instinctively understand that these were predators. They moved with the fluid grace of natural hunters, and their eyes missed nothing as they surveyed the council. The lead figure stepped forward. She was tall and lean, with dark hair and the kind of calm confidence that came from never having encountered a threat she couldn't handle. "I am Fleet Admiral Sarah Chun," she said, her voice carrying easily through the chamber without artificial amplification. "I represent the human species in all matters relating to our integration into galactic civilization." She gestured to her companions. "This is Dr. Marcus Webb, our chief xenologist, and Commander Lisa Park, our diplomatic security specialist." The Admiral moved to the center of the chamber with the easy confidence of someone who owned the space she was in. 50,000 years ago, our species made contact with galactic civilization. The experience taught us that we were not ready for the responsibilities that came with our capabilities. We chose to withdraw until we could better understand ourselves and our place in a larger universe. She activated her own holographic display, showing images of Earth, but this wasn't the primitive world that Zektar had described. The planet was surrounded by massive orbital installations, and the space around it swarmed with ships that dwarfed anything in current galactic databases. During our absence, we continued to evolve, not just technologically, but socially and philosophically. We learned to control our more destructive impulses while retaining our adaptive advantages. The display changed to show human colonies throughout the galaxy, not just in the Sol system, but scattered across hundreds of sectors, hidden installations that had been observing galactic civilization for millennia. "We never truly left," Admiral Chun explained. "We've been watching, learning, occasionally intervening when necessary to prevent galactic civilization from destroying itself. The plague that devastated the Corellian Empire 8,000 years ago? We developed a cure. The asteroid that would have destroyed the vegan homeworld 3,000 years ago? We diverted it. The war between the Altair Federation and the Centauri Republic that ended mysteriously when both sides lost the will to fight? We were there. The implications hit the Council like a physical blow. Humanity had been secretly protecting galactic civilization for thousands of years. When the Hegemony attacked Earth, Admiral Chun continued, they weren't attacking a primitive world. They were attacking a carefully constructed facade designed to appear helpless. We maintained such worlds throughout the galaxy as early warning systems. She turned to look directly at Ambassador Zektar. Your attack on Earth was detected and analyzed within minutes. We could have destroyed your entire fleet before it reached our system. Instead, we chose to let you proceed so we could observe how current galactic civilization responds to aggression. Zektar's voice was barely a whisper. You let us attack you? We needed to understand whether galactic civilization had evolved beyond the patterns that drove us away 50,000 years ago. Admiral Chun replied. The answer, unfortunately, is that it has not. She gestured to the holographic display, which now showed detailed records of every military action the Hegemony had taken over the past century. Dozens of worlds conquered, millions of beings enslaved or killed, entire species driven to extinction. The Hegemony represents everything we hoped galactic civilization would grow beyond. Expansion through violence, subjugation of weaker species, the pursuit of power without wisdom or restraint. The Admiral's expression hardened slightly. This cannot continue. Magistrate Kefmer spoke up, his ancient voice carrying the weight of millennia. "What do you intend to do?" "We intend to take our place as full members of galactic civilization," Admiral Chun replied. "But that civilization will need to change. The age of conquest and subjugation is over. From this day forward, any species that attempts to expand through violence will face human intervention." She activated a new display showing human ships positioned throughout the galaxy. Not invading forces, but Guardian fleets stationed to protect vulnerable worlds. "We are not here to conquer or rule. We are here to ensure that galactic civilization evolves into something worthy of the cosmos. Species will be free to develop according to their own nature, but they will not be free to destroy others." Commander Park stepped forward. "We have prepared new protocols for galactic governance. The Council will be expanded to include representatives from all sentient species, not just the most powerful ones. Military actions against primitive worlds will be prohibited. Trade disputes will be settled through mediation rather than force." Dr. Webb activated his own display, showing technology that could revolutionize galactic civilization. "We're also prepared to share certain technologies that will benefit all species. Medical advances that could extend lifespans by centuries. Energy systems that could eliminate scarcity. Transportation methods that could unite the galaxy." Admiral Chun raised her hand for silence as murmurs spread through the chamber. "But understand this," she said, a voice carrying an undertone that made every being in the chamber pay attention. "These gifts come with responsibilities. Any species that chooses to use these technologies for conquest or oppression will lose access to them. Any government that fails to protect the rights of its citizens will be replaced." She looked around the chamber, meeting the eyes of every council member. "We are offering partnership, not subjugation. But that partnership requires that you accept humanity as an equal member of galactic civilization, with all the rights and responsibilities that entails." The chamber fell silent as the full scope of the human proposal became clear. They weren't demanding surrender or offering conquest. They were demanding change and offering evolution. Finally, Magistrate Kethmore stood up slowly. "Admiral Chun, what happens if we refuse?" The human admiral's smile was gentle, but her words carried absolute certainty. "You won't refuse, Magistrate, because you've seen what we can do, and you understand what we could do."